I should probably put a spoiler warning on this. Hey you geeks! This video contains massive spoilers for the very end of the Wheel of Time. If you've clicked on this video randomly and haven't read the series, you have been warned. Today, we are pondering if Rand using the true power to bind Shaitan at the end of the Wheel of Time was evil. Often, I like to play devil's advocate, or rather, dark ones. Though, isn't Rand as one of those Targaryen's beyond the nature of good and evil? But Robert Jordan has said that evil does exist in Randland. One of my themes is there is good, there is evil. There is right, there is wrong. It does exist. Maybe it's not always easy to tell which is the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do, good and evil, but relative to what? This deconstructionalism irritates the devil out of me. What I believe goes into my stories, I'm not trying to preach. I believe these things, but I'm trying to tell stories. But just because the creator intended for an objective good and objective evil to exist in his masterpiece, why should we care? Or besides, how do we know that the power of the antagonist of the Wheel of Times is truly evil?
How bad can I be? How bad can I possibly be?
This is the Wheel of Time, known for combining the best of Western and Eastern influences. Therefore, I'm going to look at this question from both a Western and Eastern perspective. Western natural law philosophy states that an action is good based on its intention, the circumstances, and the act itself. For the Eastern perspective, I will do my best to convey what is consequential evil in Taoism. I am a Western scholar. Taoism is a classic Chinese philosophy with poetic primary sources and no canon. My goal is merely to convey the comparable parts of Western and Eastern philosophies that also relate to the Wheel of Time. Insofar as both of these philosophies are product of human reason aimed toward the good of their respective cultures, they are in fact good. But fortunately, they aren't equivalent.
In confusion there is profit.
Good and evil. Let's start with the basics and define our terms. What is evil anyway? I hear Netflix has a whole movie on the topic.
The School for Good and Evil, where the true story behind every great fairy tale begins.
Ignoring the philosophical school of Netflix, let's turn to rather Plato and Fuji, the mythical author of the I Ching Book of Changes. It should be noted that he is often portrayed as a man-dragon spirit with knowledge of both yin and yang. Both of these teachers hold that there is the physical world which is modeled after an invisible metaphysical world. According to Plato, the work of the creator fashions the form and the nature of his work after an unchangeable, fair and perfect pattern. But when he looks to the created only and uses a created pattern, it is not fair or perfect. Meanwhile, the I Ching describes creation as activated and led by the creative. Then creation produces good. Only when it abandons this position and tries to stand as equal, side by side with the creative, does it become evil. Thus, in both East and West, we see the rough concept of evil as deviation from the metaphysical ideal. Thus, Rand was not wrong when he said this of the Dark One. "You really are nothing," Rand said, knowing the Dark One's secrets completely. Though it is more Western to say that evil is a static lack of being, Plato would view every tree as an imperfect deviation from the ideal tree, whereas it seems in Taoism, Taoism, evil is only the active rejection of the ideal. Trees, for a Taoist, cannot have free will, and therefore every tree is perfect. Only man in Taoism has the will to reject the Tao. Man takes his law from the earth takes its law from heaven takes its law from the Tao, and the law of the Tao is being what it is. The Tao, with its yin and yang, like the wheel of time, is the ultimate good of Taoism, whereas for Plato, the ultimate good was the perfect pattern as woven by the Creator. You can see how Robert Jordan melded these two goods to create the wheel and the pattern within the wheel of time.
A single thread in a tapestry, though its color brightly shine, can never see its purpose in the pattern of the grand design.
The Dark One is therefore evil in the wheel of time, both as being nothing from the Western perspective and insofar in the Eastern perspective that he wills the opposite of the wheel and its weaving.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
Yes, but is it not possible that the Dark One and the Creator are one and the same? Brand of Sando himself has said that the voice that speaks in all capitals is the same person. Sometimes these lines are attributed to the Creator, sometimes to the Dark One, and sometimes they are said by Rand himself. Could not all these characters just be pictures of the same power, the pattern being the depiction of perfection to be attained, while the Dark One and the true power is the urge to attain it? Hence the static peace of the one and the fiery darkness of the other. Well, if you'd read the series, you'd know that neither the pattern nor the one power is incredibly static or peaceful. As for Rand being the same as the Dark One, moving on. Intention. The act I'm considering is Rand using the true power to bind the Dark One outside the wheel. Or rather, Rand using his Timaeus to use the true power to bind the Dark One outside the wheel. By doing this, Rand intended to keep the wheel spinning and the pattern weaving that he may find life and love again. He remembered love and peace and joy and hope. That's why he fought. That's why he lived again. And that was the answer to Tam's question. I fight because last time I failed. I fight because I want to fix what I did wrong. I want to do it right this time. So was binding the Dark One instead of, say, killing him the right action? Plato never really addressed the idea of a singular metaphysical evil being, so we're going to have to look a bit closer in history to find our comparison, looking no further than C.S. Lewis, who, writing as an angel in Out of the Silent Planet, gave us this account of the events of Western Christian salvation history. We drove the Bet One back out of the heavens and bound him in the air of his own world, as Perelandra taught us. And there are stories among us that he's taken strange counsel and dared terrible things, wrestling with the Bent One. Thus, it is right and proper from a Western Christian perspective that Rand, as a Christ figure, would merely bind Shaitan instead of slay him. Moreover, in the world of the Wheel of Time, to kill the Dark One means to remove free will from existence. Elaine was not herself, because Rand had taken from her the ability to be herself. In creating his vision of a world without the Dark One, he had created something horrible, something awful, something worse than what would have been before. Removing free will would, according to Plato, remove his ability to achieve the good. God invented and gave us sight to the end that we might behold the courses of intelligence in the heaven, and apply them to the courses of our own intelligences, which are akin to them, and that we, learning them and partaking of the natural truth of reason, might imitate the absolutely unerring courses of God and regulate our own vagaries, such as the belly, which does not listen to reason and is under the power of idols and fancies. Taoism, it seems, has a rather dimmer view of free will. Sought for, man's conduct will to evil change. Therefore, the sage seeks to satisfy the craving of the belly and not the insatiable longing of the eyes. Though Taoism seems to make an exception for willing the same as the Tao. It is the way of heaven not to strive, yet it skillfully overcomes. And yet men come to it of themselves. Its demonstrations are quiet, yet its plans are skillful and effective. To him by whom this harmony is known, the secret of the unchanging Tao is shown, and in the knowledge of wisdom finds throne. Arguably, the Tao is the answer that Rand found right before binding the Dark One, and therefore it's implied that his will would have been aligned with that of the Tao at the time. Therefore, his actions would have been good. So we agree. We do? There's such a thing as the main current, the life force, the you call God, or the creator, or the wheel, or the power.
All over the world there are different names for it. But it's one thing. One power.
It's a question of surrendering yourself to that, making yourself the conductor of the live, fiery central purpose, becoming the very finger that reaches out and obtains what you want. But you are mixing your metaphors. Taoism, which preaches surrender, doesn't want you to reach, while Western thought wants you to reach for the right things. Doesn't Rand embody this image as he is a mixed metaphor? Well, that depends on other factors, like circumstances. By circumstances, I mean the reasonably anticipated good outcomes outweigh the reasonably anticipated bad outcomes. If Rand's intent to bind the Dark One was good, then what circumstances could justify him tarnishing himself by using the true power to do it? Strictly speaking, the one power would have been enough to bind Shaitan outside of the pattern for good. But that would not have prevented Shaitan from lashing back out and corrupting both parts of the one power itself. The Dark One tried to pull back, but Rand's claw was gloved by the true power. The enemy could not taint Sidene again. The Dark One tried to withdraw the true power from Moradin, but the conduit flowed too freely, too powerfully to shut off now, even for Shaitan himself. The anticipated bad consequence was that Rand would be further tainted by using the true power, whereas the anticipated good consequence would be avoiding another breaking and massive loss of life, sanity, and civilization, while instead reigning in a new age of legends. Could this be the sort of sacrifice where the needs of the few are outweighed by the needs of the many?
The needs of the many outweigh
the needs of the few.
Thus, this seems to be a good action from the Western perspective, provided that the act itself is not inherently evil. More on that later. Taoism, from what I can see, doesn't so much as have a separate consideration of circumstances. Either one acts with or against the Tao, and the Tao takes care of the circumstances. Thus, Rand, acting to preserve the pattern as the wheel willed, was doing good regardless of how he did it. So you see, the Wheel of Time leaps forward through great men and women, these Tarviran, whose greatness is willed by the wheel, and therefore they transcend morality. When each leap is made forward, what the world had called evil before, like men who could channel, become the morality of the next age. The woman whose child Logain saved called Saidin a blessing, but up till then, he had been called a wretch. And yet, do you think Arthur Pendraig popularizing the item was beyond morality? That was fed to him by Shamael, and therefore contrary to the pattern. Is what Lews Therin did with his 100 companions, sealing the Dark One away and bringing about an age of madness, evil? What about killing Ilyena? Or Rand barrel-firing Grendel's stronghold? That he did with Saidin and almost broke the pattern. Of course, you can take pieces of Taoism to justify any action, but the same goes for the Bible. If you're going to play by Taoism's rules, you should not forget that Taoism has a strong insistence on preserving life and peace. The great man brings peace and security to the world through his activity in creating order. Hence why an antagonist of the Wheel of Time's second half is called the Lord of Chaos, which could be Rand. But in that case, Rand chose to do the noble thing and ride off into the sunset. When the work is done and one's name is becoming distinguished, to withdraw into obscurity is the way of heaven. Like a cowboy or a samurai. Take your pick.
You're like the wind, blowing over the land and passing on.
Thus, Rand's circumstances probably justified his action for both cultures, but all that's left to consider is the objective act. The objective act is what the person actually does. In this case, Rand using Moradin using the true power. They fed it to him. Power. Saidar from the women. The true power from Moradin. Saidin from Rand. Moradin's channeling the true power here threatened to destroy them all, but they buffered it with Saidin and Saidar, then directed all three at the Dark One. In the West, there are things and acts that are inherently evil in and of themselves, and the very essence of the Dark One, which is evil and corruption, is probably one of those things. As for the East, it seems that the Tao Te Ching would find the true power evil also, as it works contrary to the wheel and artificially increases life. All life-increasing arts to evil turn, where the mind makes the vital breathe to burn. False is the strength, and o'er it we should mourn. Thus, we have a commonality in the Wheel of Time for East and West that using the true power is evil. And Rand, it seems, used it, or rather used Moradin using it, which is an important distinction, especially in the West. Since Western moral philosophy tends to view nature as flawed in and of itself to a certain degree, it also allows for separation between the moral actor and an evil thing to determine whether or not what the moral actor does is good, such as in the tales of Brer Rabbit or any given Spider-Man movie.
Almost like being a villain and knowing my identity causes you to make deadly mistakes.
Tricking your opponent into destroying themselves is perfectly morally acceptable. We also see this kind of story in The Wheel of Time with Mara and the Three Foolish Kings. In that sense, if Rand is merely tricking Moradin to use the true power against Shaitan, then that is morally acceptable.
Dear Lord, please don't let me fuck up.
I didn't quite copy that. Say again, please.
Right.
I said everything's A-okay.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought you said.
But if Rand himself is using the true power to defeat Shaitan, using fire to fight fire, then we have some issues. If such an act was strictly necessary to trap up the Dark One and not usher in an age of madness, but rather an age of legends, then it seems that Rand was faced with no good options. Such a reality has been contemplated in Western thought from Plato to the modern day. The evil constitution of body by evil forms of government and evil discourses are uttered in private as well as in public, then all of us who are bad become bad from the two causes which are entirely beyond our control. In such cases, the planters are to blame rather than the plants. Or in Rand's case, it is the pattern that is more at fault for putting him in a no-win situation. However, in such a situation, he still has the obligation to choose the lesser evil.
Do you not know that in the service, one must always choose the lesser of two evils?
However, his moral culpability is above my pay grade. Meanwhile, turning to the Taoist perspective, it seems that this is where dualism comes to play.
One alone is not enough. You need both together.
Sure, the true power may be the essence of non-existence, but if it is necessary to protect existence, then using it isn't evil. It is that existence and non-existence give birth to the one, to the idea of the other. Rand using the three powers to bind Shaitan outside of the wheel is good because that is what is. The Tao produced one, one produced two, two produced three, three produced all things. All things leave behind them the obscurity out of which they have come and go forward to embrace the brightness into which they have emerged, while they have harmonized by the breath of vacancy. There, you see it? It's not possible to make a distinction between Rand at this moment and the universe or the wheel, insofar as he is the conductor of the central forward pressure of the universe. He is it. Do you see, you timid, scruple-mongering fool? He is the universe, the wheel, the creator, the Dark One. Anything he does at this moment cannot be confined in terms of good or evil. And yet, somehow, sealing the Dark One away did not seal Rand away. And for Rand being the creator, Sanderson has said that Nakomi is the creator's avatar in Randland, just as Shida Haran was the Dark One's avatar in the series. We've also established that him killing the Dark One would have been bad from a Western perspective, and probably from a Taoist, though you'd have to ask a Taoist if removing free will to preserve the Tao is a good thing. But if Rand could do evil while dealing with the Dark One, then he could also do good, and the rules apply to him. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Is Rand good, evil, dualistic? Who cares? Please like, share, and subscribe if you would like to see more. Thanks for watching!